On this episode of Jeffito's movie blog, I review the new documentary film, Won't You... Wait, do you hear that? What's that?
Jeff Malicki from Jeffito's movie blog, I presume?
Correct as usual, King Friday.
I take it that you have seen the new documentary film, Won't You Be My Neighbor?
Yes, Your Majesty. In fact, I was just about to sit down and film my review.
Very well then. Don't let me interrupt you anymore. You may continue.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Majesty. That was weird. Anyway, as I was saying, on this episode of Jeffito's movie blog, I review the new documentary film, Won't You Be My Neighbor? We're getting started right now. Welcome back to Jeffito's movie blog. I'm Jeff Malicki, and on this channel, I bring you movie news, movie reviews, trailer reaction videos, box office predictions, and so much more. If you love movies as much as I do, hit that subscribe button, and then make sure that you click the little bell notification icon so that you don't miss anything. Hi, neighbor. I want to give a special thank you to King Friday the 13th for making a special cameo appearance in my video. That was pretty awesome, don't you think? Yeah. So, Won't You Be My Neighbor is a documentary about Fred Rogers and the hugely popular television show that he created, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Now, I don't watch a whole lot of documentaries, and I never thought that a documentary would be my favorite film of the year 6 months in. But I'm telling you, this movie is absolutely amazing. Now, it is a documentary. There isn't a big sweeping story, there isn't any action, there's no character development, there's no actors giving good or bad performances, so this is going to be a little different type of review for me. It already is a little bit different, what with King Friday interrupting my intro there. But the movie really takes a deep dive into who Fred Rogers was. And as we find out, he was very much the same man that we saw on his television program for decades. He wasn't a fake. He wasn't an actor. He was genuine. He was sincere. He was honest. The movie talks about how the show is his ministry. How he used it to, and I don't want to use the word preach, like that kind of ministry, but he was an ordained minister, and he used the show to talk with children, to inspire them, to help them find their place in this crazy mixed-up world that we live in. In the first week of episodes, he talks about the Vietnam War. He has King Friday establish a border guard. The king is worried that balloons are paratroopers coming down and attacking the castle. This is in the first week of programs, of a children's show. I mean, my gosh. He talked about the deep issues, but he really broke it down in ways so that children could understand. He talked about the assassination of Robert Kennedy. He talked about the Space Shuttle Challenger tragedy. He talked about divorce. He talked about death. Again, on a children's show, for crying out loud. He believed that children's television could and should be more than just clowns getting pies thrown in their face, of mindless cartoons, flashy lights and colors, of superheroes fighting bad guys, of quick cuts every few seconds because people believe that kids have a short attention span. He was slow. He was deliberate. He used silence in a wonderful way. He wanted to talk to children on their level, but in a very adult way as well. He didn't necessarily treat them like children, or at least in the way that so many other children's shows back then, and even still today, treat their audience. He didn't shy away from difficult topics that other shows wouldn't even think of touching with a 100-foot pole. He had a way of conveying these things to kids in a way that they could understand when they were scared and confused and not sure what was going on. He had a way of comforting them and assuring them that, yeah, there's bad things in life, but it will be okay. There's also a heck of a lot of good out there as well. Always look for the good. Always look for the helpers. He also had a way of breaking down barriers, however subtly. When it was in the news that a white man was pouring bleach into a pool because the pool allowed white people and black people to swim together, Mr. Rogers, a pasty white dude like myself, invited Officer Clemens, a black man, to come sit in a wading pool and cool his feet with him. I mean, how revolutionary was that? The movie does go a bit into Mr. Rogers' faith. He was an ordained Presbyterian minister, as well as the fact that he was a lifelong Republican. Now, going into the movie, I thought that it was going to be a loving tribute to the man that was Fred Rogers, and it certainly is that. Absolutely it is. But it also doesn't shy away from some of his shortcomings. Francois Clemens is a gay man, and at the time, thanks not only to Fred's religious background and beliefs, as well as that of the country in general at the time, he didn't want to address that on the show. Mr. Rogers found out that Mr. Clemens visited a gay bar and told him that he couldn't go there anymore. He had to protect his image. Now, in subsequent years, Fred did come around and accepted the fact that Clemens was a homosexual man. In fact, there is a very powerful scene in this documentary where Francois Clemens is being interviewed, and he tells the story of how during a taping of one of the shows, Fred said his trademark line, "I love you just the way you are," a line that he said hundreds of times before. But there was something different about it this time. And so Clemens went over and talked to Fred after the scene was finished and asked, "Were you saying that line to me?" And Mr. Rogers said, "I've been telling you that for years." In the film, Clemens goes on to say that it was the first time he had a man say that to him, that someone loved him just the way he was. His father never told that to him, his grandfather never told that to him, and he was so touched by the fact that Fred loved him just the way that he was, that he thought of Mr. Rogers as a surrogate father from that moment forward. Powerful moment in the film. The messages in Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood were relevant back in the late 60s through 2001 when he finally hung up his sweater for the last time, but the messages may be even more relevant today. I grew up watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood religiously. Fred Rogers was my hero before I really even knew what heroes were. Somewhere in my mom's house, in one of the photo albums from when I was a kid, there's a picture of me. I'm probably no more than 5 years old at the time, at my grandpa's house, standing in front of the big console stereo unit, all decked out in my sweater and my sneakers, singing along with and holding the picture sleeve of one of his 45s. Now, for my younger viewers, a 45 was a single record. It's how we used to listen to music back in the caveman days. It had one song on one side, and then you'd flip it over, and there's another song on the other side. Now, these days, we have thousands of songs in our pockets on our cell phones. Anyway, I had a couple of his 45s, I had a couple of full-length albums of his. My mom even went through the hassle of finding out-of-print puppets for me, and managed to score King Friday and X the Owl. I remember her telling stories of what a difficult time she had trying to track these down, because at the time, I was maybe only 2 or 3 years old, maybe 4th the oldest, and they were already out of production. They were no longer being made. And this is in the late 70s, long before eBay, long before online shopping, which makes it a lot easier to track down how to find items. Now, I don't know how she did it, but she found these for me somehow, and they are some of my most treasured possessions that I own. There are so many memories associated with them. I even remember making a trolley school bus out of an old shoebox and yellow construction paper when I was getting ready to go to preschool, or maybe kindergarten, because they had just shown a week's worth of episodes where the neighborhood gets a school for Prince Tuesday, Anna Platypus, and Daniel Striped Tiger. My gosh, there's so many great memories. The man was instrumental in not only some of my earliest childhood memories, but well into my preteen years, and even occasionally I would watch the show in high school because of what he meant to me. No offense to my actual teachers, but Mr. Rogers was my greatest teacher. Not in school, not in learning English or math or science or any of that, but in learning this thing called life. And this documentary perfectly encapsulates what he meant to me and what he meant to millions of children around the world. I saw this movie first thing this morning at like 9:30 a.m. There were probably a dozen or so other people in the theater with me, mainly my age and older. In other words, people who grew up watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And let me tell you, by the end of the film, there was not a dry eye in the place. And all of us stayed through the entire credits, which honestly aren't that long, but still, we all sat there, wiping our eyes, and letting that wave of emotions that we just experienced continue to just wash over us. The movie will affect you. It will change you. It will challenge you to be a better person, to be more like Fred Rogers. And that's why this movie is so important. And again, I wish that every single person on the planet could see this. It needs to be seen. The world desperately needs a Mr. Rogers, now more than ever. And it really sucks that there's never going to be another man like him. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to be like him. We should all strive to be even a small percentage of what he was. If I have to have a negative on this film, and it is so difficult to have anything other than overwhelming praise for this thing, it's that I wish we would have gotten more interviews with the cast of the show. Now, sadly, some of the cast members have passed on. Fred, obviously, although the documentary makes wonderful use of archive interviews and footage. But Bob Trow and Don Brockett, I believe, are both sadly no longer with us. It was wonderful to see short segments with Joe Negri, David Newell, who played Mr. McFeely, and the film does spend a good amount of time with Francois Clemens. But I would have liked to have seen people like Chuck Aber interviewed, and I was really surprised by Betty Aberlin's absence. Apparently the director Morgan Neville reached out to her and did spend several hours on the phone with her, but I get the impression that she hasn't done an interview in many years, and sadly he was not able to get her to break that spell. That is unfortunate, but it is a minor nitpick. This film is wonderful. It is delightful. It is inspiring. It truly is my favorite film of 2018 so far. I'm going to give Won't You Be My Neighbor a perfect 5 out of 5 stars, and I highly encourage you to see this movie as quickly as possible. I know the film is still in very limited release, only in like 643 theaters or something like that, so it isn't showing everywhere. But if it is playing anywhere near you, I cannot emphasize enough how much you need to go out and see it immediately. If it isn't playing near you, hopefully it continues to expand into more and more theaters in the coming weeks. Otherwise, definitely check it out when it hits home video, streaming, Netflix, whatever, because, again, I believe that each and every person on the entire planet needs to see this film. It is that good. It is that delightful. It is that important. This film is simply incredible. It will shake you. It will affect you. It will make you strive to be a better human being. And, again, it's one of my favorite films of the year so far. I mean, my gosh, if it doesn't win Best Documentary at the Oscars in February, I will be shocked. Again, I saw this movie early this morning, and I was so deeply affected by it that when I got home, I dug out the puppets to use as props and spent the entire day binge-watching old episodes of the show as I tried to gather my thoughts for what would eventually become this long and rambling review. I mean, my gosh, I just love Mr. Rogers. I'm going to be 42 years old in a little over a month. Literally, in a little over a month, I'm going to be 42 years old. And this movie brought me straight back to my childhood and just a flood of memories and emotion associated with spending so much time watching this show. If you grew up loving Mr. Rogers like I did, you will simply adore this film. I guarantee it. I'm not sure how well it will play with younger folk who didn't grow up watching him, but a few of my fellow YouTubers who are younger than I am saw it and they too love this movie despite not watching him or really being familiar with him at all. If you haven't seen Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, there are many episodes available on Amazon Prime. I'll leave some links in the description down below. And if you don't have Amazon Prime, there's a DVD set with like 30 episodes available. I'll leave a link for that in the description as well. As always, full disclosure, they are Amazon affiliate links, which means if you buy something from my links, it doesn't cost you anything extra, but Amazon is generous enough to give me a small little commission, and that goes a long way towards supporting my channel here. Have you seen Won't You Be My Neighbor yet? Did it affect you as profoundly as it did me? Did you grow up watching Mr. Rogers? Or are you too young and sadly missed out on the joy that he brought to me and millions of other people around the world? Whatever you think, leave me a comment down below, and let's talk movies.
Please won't you be my neighbor?
Yes, Mr. Rogers, I will always be your neighbor. I love you. And I love you too, just the way that you are. There's only one person in the whole world like you, and that's you yourself. I'll see you next time, neighbor. Bye now. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Jeffito's Movie Vlog. You can watch more by clicking right over here. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, do so right now by clicking that round icon with my picture on it. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button and then share it with other movie fans in your life. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, I will see you at the movies. Bye-bye.